CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Death toll in Brazil prison riots rises to 57 as relatives swamp prison for news of their kin. U.S. UN envoy calls for Security Council to take a united stand to help end the fighting in Libya. And killing of 4 students creates anxiety ahead of Sudan's talks to finalize transition deal. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. Let's take a look at other stories making headlines this hour. Representatives from China and the U.S. meet in Shanghai for the first round of talks since May. And in sports, Tunisia claimed record-extending 10th Men's African Nations Volleyball Championship. We begin the hour in Brazil, where a clash between 2 rival prison gangs have left at least 57 inmates dead. According to authorities, 16 of the deceased were also decapitated. The majority of victims are believed to have died of asphyxiation after gang members set a fire to a cell containing inmates from a rival gang. The latest gang battle in the Altamira jail in northern Brazil comes as the government struggles to control the country's overcrowded and underfunded jails. In 2017, more than 120 inmates died in prisons across the northern states when rival gangs clashed over drug trafficking routes. Brazil's incarcerated population has surged 8-fold in the past 3 decades and currently stands as the 3rd largest in the world.
What we can verify is that the scene is basically macabre. There were decapitations, there were people who were asphyxiated by the smoke, but now it is calm, it's calmer. The prisoners were separated and we'll now await the official list of those that were victims and those that also survived this rebellion.
The UN Special Representative for Libya, Ghassan Salamé, has proposed a 3-part plan of action to end the conflict in the country. This includes a truce to be declared during the upcoming Eid al-Adha holiday, an implementation of an arms embargo, and a meeting of leading and influential personalities from Libya to agree on a way forward. CGTN's Michael Karanja has the story.
According to the United Nations, both sides of the Libyan conflict have failed to observe their obligations under international humanitarian law. About 1,100 people have died in the war around Tripoli, including more than 100 civilians. The armed battle for the capital shows no signs of abating.
The majority of Libyans believe that it is now time for the Security Council to join this chorus and decisively call for an end to this needless war before it grows into a full-blown civil war with serious, potentially existential consequences for Libya and its neighbors.
The deaths of up to 150 migrants at sea last week underlines the urgent need to also address the migrant issue in the country. A deadly airstrike that hit a detention center in Tajura earlier this month further highlighted their vulnerability in the ongoing conflict. More than 200 migrants were moved back into the bomb facility just recently, pushing the UN body to insist on the closure of the detention center in the country.
I urge the Council now to call upon the authorities in Tripoli to take the long-delayed but much-needed strategic decision to free those who are detained in these centers.
The special representative said Libya has become a terrain for experimentation of new military technologies and recycling of old weapons. Yet there was no doubt that external support had been instrumental in the intensification of airstrikes.
This triple action will require consensus in this Council and amongst the member states who exert influence on the ground. As for the Libyans, they need to listen to their better angels. They are now fighting the wars of others, and in so doing, destroying their country.
Key facilities have not been spared from attack, leaving Libyans at the mercies of seemingly endless war.
Impunity should not prevail, especially for those who attack hospitals and ambulances. Protecting civilians and humanitarian workers requires sanctions against those committing crimes.
Libyan Ambassador El-Mahdi El-Majabi said his government had no choice but to protect its people. He called upon the Security Council to play its part in stopping the conflict.
We regret that the Security Council stands idly in the face of the dangerous situation the country has reached. We wonder why the Security Council hasn't dotted the I's and crossed the T's and named things for what they are. Why has it not taken a decision to stop and condemn the aggression and to put an end to the negative interferences supporting it?
Fighting has remained in a deadlock after Khalifa Haftar's self-styled Libyan National Army forces began their advances to try and take over the capital, Tripoli. The country itself has been in conflict since the fall of longtime leader Muammar Gaddafi in 2011. Michael Karanja, CGTN.
In Sudan, meetings for the Joint Technical Committee of the Transitional Military Council and the Opposition Alliance were held in Khartoum on Monday. The committee has been studying the Constitutional Declaration document, which outlines the power of the Sovereign Council and the Prime Minister during the transitional period. These meetings, chaired by an African Union envoy, are meant to pave the way for direct talks between the two sides scheduled for today. Earlier this month, the TMC and opposition leaders agreed to a power-sharing deal, but they have yet to iron out certain issues. The first part of the deal was political declaration, which determines the political structures of the transitional period. The constitutional declaration is the second part. Meanwhile, the death of 4 students and an adult on Monday during a rally against shortages of bread and fuel has created doubts about progress of transition talks set for today. According to locals, the oldest was 16 while the youngest was 14. Authorities have now announced a nighttime curfew in 4 towns following these deaths in the central town of El-Obeid. A key protest group has called for nationwide demonstrations against the Monday killings.
We came out today in support of our martyrs who were killed in El-Obeid. We are not alone. Sudan is one. The blood of the martyrs is one, and our blood is one. There isn't blood from the south, the north, the center, from anywhere. Our blood is one, and we came here to support the blood of our martyrs. Our need is for a civilian government because it will be the one to bring rights for those martyrs. Every day people are killed, and now we need an independent body for the probe or an international body for the probe because we don't trust our justice system. Every day people are killed like today in El-Obeid because they came to express themselves.
Authorities in the Democratic Republic of Congo are searching for an Ebola patient who escaped from a treatment center in the North Kivu province on Monday. The patient fled from an isolation center where he was being treated for the deadly disease. CGTN's Chris Ochamringa has more from Kinshasa. Let's take a look.
The escape happened in the town of Lubero in North Kivu province. Authorities believe the patient has returned to the community. The incident has sparked fears the disease may spread more widely. According to the health ministry, the patient tested positive for Ebola on the 25th of July. A search is being conducted to prevent more infections. Last year, 3 Ebola patients escaped from an isolation center in western DRC. Health officials had to search for them and then locate all the people they came into contact with to prevent the disease from spreading. The stigma associated with Ebola has led some families to hide their sick relatives at home. But Congolese officials and the international community have stepped up efforts to educate communities about the dangers of the disease. The World Health Organization declared the outbreak a public health emergency of international concern after Ebola spread to a major urban hub of Goma 2 weeks ago. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Well, to Kenya now, where another high-profile person has died of cancer. The death of Joyce Laboso, the governor of Kenya's Bomet County, comes just a few days after a member of parliament, Ken Okoth, succumbed to the disease. And on the 1st of July, the CEO of leading telecommunications company Safaricom, Bob Collymore, died from cancer of the blood. These cases in a span of just 1 month highlight the gravity of the situation in the country. But a report by National Cancer Institute of Kenya has gone further to put the situation into perspective. It says around 80 Kenyans die each day of cancer. The report puts esophageal cancer as the top killer, esophageal cancer rather, as the top killer, causing more than 4,000 deaths every year. Breast, prostate, and cervical cancer were also ranked high in new cancer infections. All right, we are now joined in studio by Dr. Catherine Nyongesa, who is a physician and radiation oncologist. She is also the founder and chief executive officer of Texas Cancer Center right here in Nairobi. Thank you for joining us, Catherine. Thank you for taking time to join us here on Africa Live. Let's really talk about this. The three prominent personalities that we've mentioned who have died in Kenya due to cancer this month have brought the debate about cancer in Kenya to the fore. Let me ask you this: how bad is the cancer situation in Kenya, if I can put it like that?
I would say at the moment, cancer is the third leading cause of death in our country. Still, the top leading are infections, followed by heart diseases, heart attacks, high blood pressure, and then cancer comes number 3. So it's a significant public health problem.
Right. So what would you say is the leading causes of death in Kenya? I mean, what type of cancer, rather, would you say is the leading cause of death in Kenya?
Okay, if we look at women, the top commonest cancer is breast cancer, followed by cervical cancer. But in terms of causing death, it's cervical cancer, which leads in women. And in men, the commonest is prostate and esophagus, but esophagus now overtakes prostate in terms of cause of death. And in general, when we look at the global statistics that were released in 2018, they show that esophageal cancer is the top leading cause of death.
All right, let's talk about the cost of actually treating this disease. Now, how are the locals or people who can't afford treatment overseas, how are they to solve this problem of treatment?
Our government has made significant strides, and you know, cancer is a global problem. It is not just a Kenyan problem. And overall, we see like 18 new million cancer cases every year in the whole world, and 50% of them succumb to the disease. So even a developed country like America is still grappling with the cancer menace. So Kenya, we are also in the same, but looking at the East African region, I think Kenya has positioned itself as a leader in cancer care. And in terms of cost, we have the National Hospital Insurance Fund, which is supporting patients, especially the common mwananchi, to access timely and cost-effective treatment without digging too much into the pockets. The problem only comes when a patient presents late with advanced stage cancer. Then you find the cost is more, because a cancer patient needs multiple intervention. You need an oncologist, a pathologist, a radiologist, a counselor, a nurse, you know, and we have radiotherapy. So it's a whole lot, it's a big team, a multidisciplinary team. And this is what costs money to treat a cancer patient. And it becomes more complex when you have to get all the 3 modalities of treatment, like surgery, radiation, chemotherapy. So you find a patient spending anything from 100,000 to $500,000 on this treatment. But if you go overseas, then we are talking of millions of Kenya shillings, because outside the country you have to fly. There is accommodation cost to it, and I mean, overseas treatment is even actually more expensive. Yeah.
Well, to critics who say that there's too much emphasis on screening as opposed to prevention, to that you say what?
We actually, there are national policies. They are on screening, on prevention, and on treatment. So when we look at treatment, it's just the tail end of events that have happened in the grassroots level. And now we are moving back to the grassroots level. How do we avoid this disaster of getting patients late? Let's go there, screen, tell them about, you know, healthy habits. Like you find simple things that we do in the village, like maize. You find maize is bad. It has aflatoxin and it's not fit for human consumption, and they will give it to our cows. When the cows eat this kind of maize, we are going to get the aflatoxins and get cancer. So simple things, teaching the communities that food that is not fit for human consumption is also not fit for animal consumption. Teach them about use of tobacco and alcohol. Excessive use is not healthy. to avoid these kind of diseases. Exercise, you know, simple things, vaccination. We need to immunize our children against HPV, which causes cervical cancer, and hepatitis B, which causes liver cancer. We also need to create awareness on the common symptoms of cancer. What are the common types of cancer? What are you to watch out for? So if you see these symptoms and you are being treated for simple illnesses and the symptoms are not going away, it's good to check for cancer such that we can diagnose it early and spend less money on treatment.
Well, I guess you've pretty much answered my next question. Prevention is better than cure.
True.
Is there anything that stands out for you that you would like the viewing public to know which could help them prevent acquiring cancer?
Okay, unfortunately, 70% of cancer is not preventable. It occurs maybe due to genetic reasons, due to environmental random mutations of our genes, but there are those risks that we can we can avoid the risk of getting some types of cancers. And some of the risk factors include, number one, excessive use of tobacco and alcohol. It has been shown that it increases cancer. And recent research shows that...
It's been shown, but has it been publicized?
Yes, it's been publicized, and I think we are now putting it to our members of the public to be aware.
Okay.
And a recent research showed that obesity is the new smoking. People have heard about tobacco use and they are changing their lifestyle. What about obesity? Every day we don't want to walk. We are using cars, Uber from here to there. You are using boda instead of walking. Also, we're looking at air pollution. We want to walk in the streets, like I want to walk from here to town. But when you walk, you find there's a lot of pollution from vehicles, those fumes. So, you know, we have to look at how can we improve our environment to reduce these pollutants. In terms of immunization, if we have immunized children, they're more healthy and they can fight cancer. And there are certain types of immunization that we are really focusing on, human papillomavirus and hepatitis, because this prevents some certain cancers from occurring.
All right, Dr. Catherine Nyongesa, thank you so much. So many questions, so little time. But thank you for joining us here on
You're
Africa
most
Live.
welcome. Yeah.
You are watching Africa Live on CGTN. We've got a lot more news stories coming your way after the break. Ethiopia plants 350 million trees in one day, supplanting India's 50 million trees record. And protesters in Hong Kong delay a train in East Kowloon, causing commuter chaos for about 2 hours.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Protesters in Hong Kong have delayed a train in East Kowloon, causing commuter chaos for about 2 hours. On Tuesday morning, several protesters wedged themselves between the train's automatic doors and stopped the train from leaving the station. Hundreds of commuters were forced to stand in queues as they waited for services to resume. Tuesday's protest follows violent demonstrations at the city's international airport on Friday. The police also clashed with activists over the weekend, firing rubber bullets, tear gas, and sponge grenades to stop the crowds. Meanwhile, many social organizations and residents in Hong Kong gathered at police stations on Monday to show their support for the police, hoping that they continue to work hard to enforce the law and maintain order and security in Hong Kong.
The Hong Kong police are very professional. They bear responsibility and blame. We want to appeal to the world that we don't want the police officers to be hurt or killed on duty. We support the police officers for legally using force against the rioters.
The protesters committed acts of vandalism after each parade. I think it must have an influence on social order. But I believe the Hong Kong police are able to quell the riots. I have full confidence in them.
Hong Kong's police say acts by radical protesters became increasingly violent over the weekend. Protesters escalated from removing railings and hurling metal pipes and bricks to extensive arson and destruction. Police say an operation was carried out to disperse the protesters, and at least 49 people were arrested for offenses, including unauthorized assembly and possession of weapons. Now let's take a look at how violence escalated in the past weeks and its impact on businesses.
Rallies started in June and soon escalated into violent protests. On July the 1st, the 22nd anniversary of Hong Kong's return to China after nearly a century of British rule, a gang of so-called protesters barged into Hong Kong's Legislative Council and vandalized facilities. While clashing with the police in a shopping mall, rioters attacked officers with umbrellas, iron bars, bricks, unidentified gas and powder. 13 police officers were hospitalized, 5 of them severely injured. One policeman's finger was bitten off. Many living in Hong Kong said they've never seen such outrageous violence and inhumanity.
These things have set back the progress of peaceful evolution of democracy in Hong Kong by at least 2 or 3 generations, and in China by 4 or 5 generations. This is the saddest thing. These protesters may have thought that they were doing something good, but I think most of them were just thugs and vandals out to have a fight with the police, most of them.
But it didn't stop there. A group angered many last week by vandalizing the Chinese national emblem. Also, a few days ago, an elderly man was shoved and shouted at for refusing to take a flyer from the protesters. They chased the man, pushed him into a wall, and stuck the flyer onto his back. The ongoing chaos is pressuring Hong Kong's already slowing economy. The summer months are usually a gold time for the city's tourism industry.
Hong Kong used to be a shopping paradise, but the violent incidents have stopped some of my friends from visiting Hong Kong. Peace and stability here are very much affected.
There's no point in opening with no business. Trade is down to less than 20% really. Since the protests began in mid-June, our business had fallen by 30 to 40%. That's a serious hit.
As rioters continue their radical acts, millions of dollars have slipped away.
Based on the reports that provided by the Hong Kong Retail Management Associations, the sales turnovers of their members has already dropped by double digits in the past weeks.
Our exports in June saw a decrease of 9% points from last year, and we are really concerned about this. If the situation continues, the economy will be in big trouble.
CGTN.
Ethiopia has gone into the record books by planting over 350 million trees in a day. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed is leading the project, which aims to counter the effects of deforestation and climate change in the drought-prone country. The UN says Ethiopia's forest coverage declined from 35% of total land in the early 20th century to a little above 4% in the 2000s. CGTN's Gerum Chala has more on this story.
The name of the initiative, Green Legacy. The total number of seedlings planned for planting, 4 billion. And so far, Ethiopia has managed to plant more than 3 billion of them in less than 6 months' time. Within a day, a record 200 plus million seedlings were planted across Ethiopia. Of that number, Addis Ababans take 3 million.
So the initiative to plant 4 billion trees and especially 7.7 million in Addis Ababa, and all over today we're planning to plant 3 million. Of course, the turnout will be more than 3 million, and the initiative is to cope up with the current environment, and so that we build a resilient economy, a resilient city, so that the resident of the city will have more fresh environment.
The nationwide tree planting initiative was launched by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed himself, creating awareness about the green development and motivate reforestation were some of his plans. Hundreds of millions of people responded across Ethiopia quickly and have joined the campaign.
As you have seen, the people came out driven by their own interests to plant seedlings. In the meantime, I would like to mention to you that we are committed to protect and water these seedlings and inspire you who will see them grow well.
I'm here with my child who is less than 2 months old. We came to leave our green legacy by planting seedlings. It simply is a God-sent initiative that we are happy to be part of.
I would really like it if this day could be celebrated as an yearly seedling planting day or simply a green day. I would like in this regard to thank our Prime Minister for this idea. He is our green leader.
With the plan of planting 4 billion trees going well, Ethiopia is well positioned to improve its current 4% forest coverage. Addis Ababa's Mayor Takala Uma is even hopeful the campaign could be exemplary for the rest of the African continent.
Hey, climate change is real, it's not a hoax, and the initiative is to make Ethiopia green again and Addis Ababa green again. And we will always remember that Addis Ababa by itself is a fresh flower, a new flower, and we need to make it again, and we need to make Addis to live up to that name and remember what started in Addis is inspired all over Africa. And remember that also Addis Ababa is a seat for Africa, African Union, and African people that we're still residing here, and we are happy to have them too.
Ethiopia might be grappling with all sorts of challenges, from ethnic inflated chaos to political and economic instability. But with the kind of unity people are displaying across the country, experts tell you Ethiopia has a reason to hope for a brighter and stronger future soon to come. Group Dara CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
All right, let's get more on this story. We've got CGTN's Gerum Chala on the line from Addis Ababa. Gerum Chala, thank you for joining us on Africa Live. Always a pleasure talking to you. Well, let's dig straight into it. 350 million trees in a day. The first thing the rest of the world would want to know is, how did Ethiopia do it? Well, I'd like to apologize for this break in communication, but the backlog of that story is that Ethiopia has planted over 350 million trees in a day. Hopefully, we'll get more on that from Gerum Chala a little later on. Moving on, Nigeria's capital Abuja is one of the fastest growing cities in Africa, but there is not enough affordable housing to accommodate its growing population. Workers are increasingly forced to commute for hours every day from outside the city because they've been priced out of the housing market. Our correspondent Phil Ihaza has more on that story. Let's take a look.
Jerome Oche is returning home to his family after another long day at work as a maintenance engineer. It takes him nearly 3 hours every day to get home to his wife and children in the countryside outside Abuja. He says his work is suffering as a result.
I came outskirts of the city 2 years ago because I couldn't afford to pay the rent in the city at then. And still till now, I've not been able to gather enough money yet to move to the city. And having my work in the city, going to the city to fix heavy-duty generators from here is a heavy challenge.
Nigeria's capital is home to more than 2.8 million people, but there's a housing deficit of 1.7 million homes. At least 170,000 new houses need to be built each year to address the problem. That's according to the National Bureau of Statistics. The government is struggling to achieve that target alone, though, which is why a group of property advisors mounted a recent housing expo in Abuja.
You're aware that there's housing deficit in Nigeria, and we don't want to leave this responsibility to the government alone. So we're trying to, bridge that gap, and of course it's an investment opportunity for us as well.
Some property developers are offering a 50% discount on houses valued at over $70,000. But in a country like Nigeria, where the minimum wage is $83 per month, these houses are still out of reach for many people.
Even if you want to sell such a house to a civil servant, the amount is very huge. The amount, cannot be deducted at the period or even the last span of the person. Because how much would they be deducting from your salary? How much can you take home?
Experts say the minimum wage of low-income earners will need to increase substantially in order for them to afford a good home in the city.
The government has directed banks to make housing more affordable and provide cheaper mortgage plans so low and middle-income earners can afford to live in the city.
Until then, the likes of Oche will have to cope with long commutes and maximizing the little time left with family. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja, Nigeria.
Well, the news continues on Africa Live. Let's take a look at our business headlines. Representatives from China and the U.S. meet in Shanghai for the first round of talks since May. High cost of living in Zimbabwe forces some public workers to spend nights in the office to cope. Nigeria is my home. 160 million vibrant, ambitious individuals constantly seeking the perfect self-expression. It is these people who inspired me to be that person that is seen, to be a voice that is heard, and ultimately to be the anchor that I am. I have to tap in, tune in, and turn on the very best qualities within me to deliver the news. I'm Richard Nta, an anchor for CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. China and the U.S. are meeting in Shanghai for the first round of talks since May. The two-day meeting is aimed at implementing the consensus reached by the leaders of the two countries during the sidelines of last month's G20 summit in Japan. The Chinese delegation is headed by Vice Premier Liu He, while the U.S. side has Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer and Secretary of the Treasury Steven Mnuchin. Well, the talks are the latest development in the lingering trade tensions between the world's two largest economies. CGTN's Sun Tian talks us through the major events in the past few months leading to or up to resumed negotiations.
If we look back over this year, tensions were at an all-time high in May after the 11th round of China-U.S. trade talks suffered a major setback. The U.S. decided to increase additional tariffs on $200 billion worth of Chinese goods from 10% to 25%. U.S. President Donald Trump also threatened to raise duties on more Chinese imports. Beijing made its stance clear to Washington after that. If you want to talk, the door is open. If you want to fight, we will fight to the end. China also retaliated with extra tariffs on a range of U.S. imports on June 1st. Later that month, President Xi Jinping and President Trump met on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Osaka, Japan, where they agreed to restart trade talks based on mutual respect. It was seen as a diffusing point for the world's two largest economies, and several million tons of U.S. soybeans have been shipped out to China this month. This is China's first major purchase of U.S. farm products since May. And meanwhile, the U.S. has waived extra duties on 110 types of industrial products from China. Chinese authorities said the latest measures have shown the two sides' readiness to implement the consensus reached by the two presidents.
Tensions between the U.S. and China are being felt strongly in many American states. Many governors are saying that the damage has already been done in billions of dollars of lost investment. And they're quietly defying Trump to try to keep trade with China going. CGTN's Owen Fairclough has more on that story.
The US and China are still locked in a trade war, and some experts fear it may escalate into something worse.
The United States faces the potential for major conflict with China on all fronts: strategy, diplomacy, security, military.
Individual states such as Oregon are among the casualties.
What is happening nationally has had a chilling effect on commodity prices and our ability to sell goods to China. It's been extremely detrimental, particularly in the agricultural sector, which is a huge driver of the Oregon economy.
Oregon once benefited from record Chinese investments in the US, and China remains the #1 client for the Port of Portland. But overall, Chinese direct investment in the US has dropped more than 80% since President Trump took office in 2017. Missouri's former governor has also witnessed the fallout of the White House pressuring China into changing what it considers harmful trade practices.
The tariffs hit our region more than anybody else in terms of agriculture.
If individual states can't alter federal trade policy, they are determined to keep their relationship with China alive by investing in cultural and educational exchanges.
From my perspective as a governor, it's all about the jobs and the economy, right? But if I can't impact that, and I'm going to do everything I can to impact that side, then I'm going to focus on the relationship piece, the cultural piece, because that's a long-term investment.
As China hosts the latest round of trade negotiations with the US, these leaders hope that kind of long-term view will prevail. Owen Fairclough, CGTN.
Well, South Sudan has reached an agreement with neighboring Uganda and Ethiopia to import electricity. The first phase of the deal will see power imported to the oil producers' border areas. This comes as South Sudan attempts to enhance economic recovery in areas greatly affected by the civil war. With the details, here's CGTN's Patrick Oyet.
South Sudan's government is in the process of installing 100 megawatts of power equipment in Juba. The country's electricity ministry says it has agreements with Uganda and Ethiopia to connect South Sudan's towns close to the two countries.
I think it's a great option. Certain countries around the world, they import electricity. And for a new country like South Sudan coming out of a conflict, it's a good step. Because when these towns have reliable electricity, their economy can begin to grow. And when their economy begins to grow, they can attract international investment for large-scale projects.
Many residents in Juba say they welcome the move.
We are using solar system, we are using generator, which is not reliable. Getting fuel is a problem, but if we have electricity in place, which is reliable for us to run our business, and then I think that is a good move.
What the government has planned right now, it's really very good. It's going to help. It's of a serious advantage because currently when you look at the whole city, it's all running on generators only.
Juba says the move will allow economic recovery of areas affected by the civil war.
South Sudan's government also says it's looking for investors to fund 5 major hydropower projects across the country. But until peace in the country is fully established, securing investment will be a challenge. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
Zimbabwe's government workers are saying they are being squeezed by inflation, running at an annual rate of 175%. Can you believe it? The country's struggling economy is now forcing some to live in their places of work just to cut down on the cost of rent and transportation. Here is CGTN's Farai Wakatuya with the details.
The unrelenting price hikes have seen More Blessing Nyambara's standard of living decline rapidly and forced drastic changes.
I have cut down my meals to 1 per day. I can only eat when I'm back from work. I just go in the morning, I spend the whole day at work, and then when I'm home, that's when we can organize a meal so that we can eat, all of us, when we are home. We can no longer afford a situation whereby anyone can eat anything anytime he or she feels like at home. But as a family, we have to wait for each other, and then we eat together so that we won't waste any food anymore.
The high school mathematics teacher takes home 321 Zimbabwe dollars after deductions. well below the $1,200 basic consumer food basket, and not enough to attend to urgent obligations.
With that 321, it's totally difficult. I couldn't place anything because now I have my mother who is sick. So I needed to buy some painkillers. I only bought painkillers for her, and it was finished. I can't take her to the hospital. I only bought painkillers. But I have to take her to the hospital. She has to be diagnosed. Maybe she has cancer or something. But because we can't, it will grow and we'll lose her. So I think if my government do something now, and it has to be now.
President Mnangagwa has acknowledged the current hardships and says the painful austerity measures will begin to ease by the end of this year. In the interim, his government has offered civil servants allowances and an increment to cushion them. However, the workers say what's currently on the table won't take them very far.
Unions representing them want October 2018 salaries reinstated.
I think they have to give us the money equivalent to our $500 they used to give us. And with that, we can survive. If they use the interbank rate, we are okay.
More Blessing is one of the more fortunate ones, able to supplement her income with poultry and gardening projects. But with the economic crunch affecting everyone, her client base is shrinking, and that will make it harder for her to stay afloat. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Well, the news continues on Africa Live. We've got a lot more interesting, amazing, and inspiring stories coming your way. Here's a look at what's ahead. Senegal pledges to clean up its act and shed off tag of being among the top contributors of plastic in the ocean.
Join us from Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival, and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. A photo exhibit by Vincent Tremue featuring the hopes and dreams of girls trapped in crisis around the world has opened at UN headquarters in New York. The exhibition theme, One Day I Will, kicks off the 2019 World Humanitarian Day campaign, which throughout August will honor women humanitarians throughout the world. One person in every 70 is caught up in a humanitarian crisis. Among those affected are women and girls.
These girls face stark odds. As their families endure increasing strain, these girls are ever more likely to be pulled out of work, forced to work, out of school, doomed into early marriage, or even sexual slavery. But in this exhibition today, ladies and gentlemen, it reminds us that these girls refuse to be defined by vulnerability. They are resilient, creative, determined, and yes, absolutely defiant. With the right tools and support, we can help them on their journey to make their dreams their destiny.
I always talk to the people I photograph. Actually, when I do a portrait, the portrait you see, it takes me 5 minutes to take it, but I took for 45 minutes with each. So I talk more than I spend more time talking to the people than I spend taking the photos. To me, talking to the people is what brings trust and the story behind the photo is as important as the photo itself. Doing that photo project started as a game, the dress-up game. You dress up as what you want to become when you grow up. It was a game to the costume game, basically. It was a way when you're 8 years old, sometimes you don't have the words to express yourself well, but you have the creativity.
Well, the West African nation of Senegal is one of the world's biggest contributors to plastic in the ocean, and that's according to a study reported by the journal Science. Now, Senegal's government is set to crack down on polluters with a new law, police interventions, and fines. But with the country having failed to enforce a plastic ban, Senegalese remain skeptical about the seriousness of government's efforts to keep the country clean. CGTN's Tuli Shabalala has that story.
For more than 10 years, Senegalese eco-warrior Mado Fall has been fighting to change people's habits of throwing plastic waste out into the streets. Covering himself in used plastic bags, he regularly visits schools and teaches children about the importance of caring for the environment, wildlife, and the ocean's ecosystem.
So if we go on like this and don't change our behavior, then the fight against climate change will go on. That is what's causing all the problems, all the disasters you see around the world. It is a lack of willingness. People need to know that the state can't do everything, because it is not the authorities that bring all of this waste here. It's the people. It is their place of work. It is their dumping ground. It's here they do just whatever.
Environmental group Greenpeace says it is not enough to rely on individuals to keep the environment clean. They want the government to impose a total ban on single-use plastic and packaging. In 2015, government did ban the single use of plastic bags, yet it continues to be an integral part of the urban landscape and ends up in the coastline of Dakar.
It's true, we should have enforced the law immediately, given that it was a law that dates back to 2015 and it is applicable. There was a delay when the law was voted, a delay given to importers, a delay given to producers, but also to everyone in the industry, the resellers and so on. But we have deemed necessary to speak to the people, to make them aware of the negative impact of plastic on our environment.
Authorities in the country have drafted new laws and are raising awareness on the harmful effects of plastic. In coming months, police officers will start going to shops and handing out fines of up to $85 to those that are still handing out thin plastic bags.
In our zero-waste transition, we have to start eliminating all plastic bottles and replace them with glass bottles. You see, look at the beach now, how beautiful it is. But at 1 p.m., 2 p.m., you come back and it looks like a dumping ground because people bring their products in their plastic and they throw it anywhere.
Senegal will be joining the ranks of countries like Kenya, Rwanda, and Cape Verde that have imposed severe restrictions on the use or manufacturing of single-use plastics. Tuli Shabalala, CGTN.
We've got your sports news coming up after the break. Here's a look at that headline. Tunisia claimed record extending 10th Men's African Nations Volleyball Championship.
Africa, where champions are made, records are broken, legends are born. We're there for every goal